Hey, folks, good evening. So before I get started, I wanted to, because it is Father's Day, any fathers out there watching this, happy Father's Day. Uh, but that being said, what I really want to talk here is about the travel through the labyrinth, right? Which is really chapter 7 in the Labyrinth World book that was released last week, right? So I wanted to go through this because it's different, right? For many years, decades, of D&D play, um, it's always been the ethereal or astral planes that you would do the majority of your traveling, right? Maybe you had some gates and stuff like that, but really not too much, right? I would say those other methods were tend to be more used, astral or ethereal, because darn it, they were more interesting, right? As a DM, if you can push them towards having to travel potentially in a dangerous area. And it's kind of dark in here, so I'm kind of stepping back so you can see me a little better. But yeah, it's more interesting to go through a dangerous area because you can chuck stuff at them, things can happen, so forth. What's so interesting about like throwing up a portal, stepping through, and you're done? Right? Not much, right? Unless you just don't want, as a DM, to deal with the traveling part of the episode. Or if you're a player and don't want to deal with the traveling part of the episode. But that aside, right? I mean, generally it's more interesting to make the characters quote unquote work for it to get to their destination. So those were used more frequently. So let's take a look at what happens in the labyrinth a bit and just kind of expound on it a little bit and digest and see where it takes us, right? Before I jump to chapter 7, right, I want to touch on links and tunnels in this paragraph here in the beginning of the Labyrinth book, which just describes the tunnels and the that you go through or the passageways you go through in the labyrinth. And it's interesting as you kind of go through here, right? It talks about um, the roads and tunnels change appearance as the traveler moves along them, influenced by their creators and nearby worlds. So interesting, right? So, and it goes on to give examples here. So, if you're near like something in the old ring, which tends to have a very forest like planet, then you're going to find that the travel path that you're on is going to look very foresty, right? Kind of like in Lord of the Rings when they're going through Fangard Forest or what have you, right? Or if you're going to somewhere near, say, Celestia, where you're near heaven, so to speak, then it looks kind of, you know, starry as they call it, or more angelic, right? Whereas if you're getting close to hell, might look a little warm, right, so to speak, and so forth. So it's a nice idea, right? And they talk about at the end the void where those paths are decaying, right, along with their worlds, and can be dangerous. So that's an interesting thing. Is just to throw it in there before we go on the rest of this, to try and picture what these paths are going to look like, and they're very much going to look like the location that they're potentially near. Of course, you might say this is an 80-20 rule, right? And there's plenty of times where it might look like something unusual, different for whatever way your DM wants it to. But I thought it was cool. All right, so let's jump into chapter 7 for a little bit and kind of digest what they have in here. So they talk about using portals and gates. So the way I was picturing this as I kind of read this, and I don't know, can I scroll over to see? Maybe that's all there is, right? I thought this was a bigger picture, but maybe not. Oh well. So I look at it as you're moving through these passages, right, of the labyrinth, wherever they're taking you, and then you're going to get these portals appearing, right? Um, I'm going to skip this gate section here for a second because this gate section is just basically talking about the gate spell or something similar, where something just pops up and takes you where you want to go, right? Um, but let's talk about these physical portals, right? So you have physical portals in the labyrinth, and these portals themselves are interesting in ways that you as a DM can fiddle with, right? So to talk about this for a second, you have detected by one of the five senses, which doesn't have to be sight. So okay, but however they pop into existence, right? These physical portals can pop into existence on their own, you know, so it's a crossing point between the labyrinth, the great maze as they call it here, and the world itself, right? And those portals, who knows how long they're going to last, right? So if you're traveling along the labyrinth and you say, "Hey, we got to go in here and go do world A, B, or C," depending on the portal, if you're just picking some random one, it might not be there when you get back, right? So something to keep in mind if you're the traveler or if you're a DM, you could use this as a timer, right? Maybe the players know in some way that that portal is only going to last for so long, right? Again, if I'm drawing a parallel from ideas in movies or literature and so forth, kind of reminds me a bit of the old movie Time Bandits, right? Where you had the band of adventurers and a little boy going through time through portals and going to different timey-wimey stuff, right? This isn't time travel. This is something different. But the point from the movie was they had a map, and the map would say where the portal was going to be, how long it was going to last, and where it was going to go next, right? So you could do something similar here, where at least the players understand that, they might only have 2 days, 5 minutes, and 18 seconds before the portal goes away, right? So if they're going to do the adventure, it puts them on a clock, right? And it gives a point of tension. So that's interesting. And then you get into the various things you can do here with these portals. So it talks about after that, you know, basically that powerful arcanists, wizards, mechanists, other fiddly type smart people could find ways to construct a physical portal. Or maybe they can even take a portal and that pops up and be able to fix it, right? Um, as well as you're kind of going through all this, that because you have a fixed portal, that can be something that could be needs to be guarded. You might not want anything just to go through them, right? If you take a look at some of these things, like for example, right? Let's say you're in one of the towns in the labyrinth, and then um, when you're in the labyrinth, you don't want a whole bunch of demons coming through your portal, right? So you fixed it, but if someone finds out about it, that could be a bad thing, right? So it talks about as you go further down here about portal keys that you can take a portal and not only fix it in place, but you can lock it, right? So again, something interesting, right? Is a whole bunch of things that if you're playing Labyrinth versus demons or devils or whatever you're trying to finagle here, you can really play around with these things where maybe you want to lock it, maybe some bad forces are trying to unlock it, uh, or maybe break through the lock. Like, who knows, right? But there's a lot of different things in here you could do. Now, the portal key also interesting as it talks about this as you go through here. Here's the beginning of the portal keys, and as you go down, right, it talks about that these portal keys are basically almost always for single use only. You can get in, you can get back, and that's it, right? So, you know, another interesting thing, you're sending a team on a mission. Here's your key. One, you better not lose it or you're not getting back. And two, uh, if you can't have some of the group leave and then come back again, right? So it makes sense in a lot of different ways. It's a security measure for the same things I was saying earlier. You don't want a key to get into the wrong hands potentially, um, and therefore, have unwanted guests coming through your portal, right? Maybe it doesn't say this here. Um, at least I didn't read it when I looked at it, but maybe as just an idea, you could have the key keyed to certain individual or individuals potentially. Um, Again, just an idea. That would certainly, if the key was stolen and someone couldn't use it, okay, yeah. I mean, that limits some attention on one hand. On the other hand, if someone has, excuse me, if someone has a key, the bad guys, quote unquote, get the key and they can't use it, then what's the point of keeping it around? You might as well potentially destroy it. And then whoever is there with you is potentially stuck with you and they have to find another way home. And then you've got more time to try and potentially track them down and whatever else you want to do with it, right? So there's a lot of things that you can play with these keys in terms of tension points, right? And not that you couldn't do this in D&D, but this wasn't really concepts that came out there with gates and portals and stuff like that. So having it spelled out here and being able to fiddle with it in certain ways, um, yeah, pretty neat. Also here it mentions how portals can be sealed, like permanently. Um, Takes a crap ton of magic, but yeah, if you want to make sure, like, maybe you want to make sure that no one's coming out here, or you don't know who has, like it talks in here about there are some keys, rare, very rare, ancient keys that aren't just a round trip ticket, right? That they can do unlimited trips. If you know that someone has such a key and you don't want them coming and messing with your stuff, maybe there's certain portals that you have to permanently close. So, in my mind, this just gets into a whole labyrinth campaign where you are, you know, a faction that is like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of it, like Time Lords from Doctor who oversee everything. Or if you want to get into the Marvel films, man, the whatever it was, the thing from the Loki films and the Deadpool and Wolverine, where they were kind of outside of time, right? you wouldn't be outside of time here, but the idea that you're overseeing the labyrinth, you're the policeman of the labyrinth in a sense, and you're trying to make sure that the forces of the void, hell, whoever it might be, is trying to not get into your spot. Maybe you find some way to permanently seal some troublesome portal, right? Could be a campaign around that about getting the resources to try and make sure that something is sealed from the forces of what evil, entropy, what have you, right? Um, so yeah, again, lots of interesting concepts here that you could do in a greater world. Um, it talks about rifts in here as well. So these are unstable, volatile, temporary portals created when the fabric of reality is shredded. Uh, and it talks about here about rifts can happen when you cast a weird spell, fifth circle or higher. Doesn't give any percentages about that. You can look at the weird spells. There's only a few in this book. Somewhat ironically, I thought there would be a few more. But supposedly, the Player's Guide 2, everyone is saying, is going to have a lot more weird in it. So it'll be interesting to see if that's going to be everybody or not everybody, so to speak. Or every spell, I should say, or not every spell. So, yeah, we'll. It says everyone above fifth level. So, for Void, it just says from weird magic sources. Okay, there's no percentage to it, so I'll either have to look at some of the spells later, or you make up whatever makes sense. But I think of these void rifts, these tears in space. I mean, again, I kind of think of um, Doctor Who. I guess I'll put a spoiler in here, but I guess, it's been a long time, right? During the Matt Smith era, there was this rift that constantly appeared in his Doctor arc. And I guess I won't say what that was from in case somebody out there hasn't seen it. But yeah, it's kind of a rift like that, is how I picture it. I wanted to jump in a second to the void, right? To talk about these void rules because these are interesting as well. So when I read these void rules, I mean, it's kind of worse than going to hell. It's at least in my mind. So when I think of the rules to hell, if you've played either, whether it's the Chains of Asmodeus that came out some time ago, which I'm always itching to play that someday, or the Advernus Adventure that came out even longer ago, right? Um, when you're in hell in role playing, I would say that a drawback to hell is that you kind of have to have players who are either going to be willing to take on some of the temptations in hell, or um, you as a DM got to be really creative to try to force them on the players, right? And realistically, it's kind of hard to do that a lot, right? Um, I mean, you can get away with that once or twice, but usually at some point the players kind of stand up to it all and they're just like, nope, nope, I don't care what you're going to offer me. If I die, I die. I'm not going to have you corrupt my soul, yada, yada, yada. That just gets into um, religious folklore, we'll call it, right? No matter which almost religion that you follow, they all have some hell or hell-like structure in modern times, right? So people are kind of really adverse generally to take on too many temptations, even with a fantasy character. Again, if you have the right group and the right people, you can definitely find people who dive right into that, but it's kind of rare, right? With this though, with the void, just being there, being near, if you're going to think of the void, the deep void, as true entropy in a sense, right? Just being exposed to it is potentially hazardous in a way that not so in hell. Right? There's some corruption that can happen in hell. Maybe you got to build that into your game, but the void seems to me worse. So when you talk about the void here, what do they talk about? So they talk about this thing called void taint, which is basically measured in levels, and it goes yada yada yada, and you can accrue this, and the amount of void taint equals its proficiency bonus plus its charisma modifier, minimum 2 levels. Just to put a pin in that, I disagree. This should be charisma modifier. Makes And from one side of the view, it makes 0 sense to me. From the other side, I guess if I squint, right? So why would heck would you pick charisma to resist something like entropy, right? If charisma is truly supposed to be something about your personality, how well you relate to folks, or can intimidate them, or whatever, why would that be your save for the void? Now, again, if I squint, in my opinion, the way I would try to rationalize that is that if you're looking who's casting the void spells, they are probably going to, for right now, the only one you have are warlocks. Warlock is a charisma spellcaster. We have way too many charisma spellcasters. I'll just kind of pop that pin in it. Um, and yeah, so it makes sense of trying to make your charisma spellcaster be um resistant to the void because they are using it potentially quite a bit, right? um does that mean that the witch, when that comes out in Player's Guide 2, is also going to be a charisma spellcaster? Do we really need that many? I kind of feel like the reason, and maybe this is the reason why, right? I'm not in the inner circles of people who play role player games by any stretch, but is all this because so many people like role playing, so they're trying to like promote role playing by making everyone have decent charisma because that's what spellcasters use? It's a stretch, but to me makes no sense, right? So I, as a house rule, would not use charisma, right? If you read further here, basically the effects of void taint, and I'll how do you get how void taint happens is another page in, so let's put a pin in that, and we'll get to that in a second. But if you were to fail this or you accrue too much of it, then you would get one of two effects, right? You would either get a mental effect, right, which would be this indefinite dread that, if you're thinking Cthulhu with some of this stuff, as if you don't think of it as entropy, you want to think of it from a Cthulhu point of view. Um, you can see where this is coming in, right? Where you have this dread of seeing things that maybe aren't there or what have you, or it could be flesh warp, which would be a physical um, effect that happens to you. So it could be mental or physical to your character. This thing warns you that some people might not be comfortable with physically or mentally playing with their character. Um, and I've seen that from other Discord servers I've been on, I've seen where someone tried to give someone a physical characteristic that they didn't want because of something that had gone wrong. And they went to the owners of the Discord server and basically said, I don't want this, right? And they weren't forced to take it. Um, I get it as a DM though, and I guess you got to discuss with your players about these things for sure. Uh, I, as a DM, would be pushing hard for this and trying to have players that would be okay with this. If they get some sort of physical or mental defect, and they really don't want it, then, hey, make it a quest. This is what happened to your character. You want to get rid of it? Fine. Go figure out how to get rid of it with you and your group. But again, make sure you discuss these things at the table. So, at any rate, you have these physical and mental deformities that can happen just being exposed by the void. I wouldn't use charisma. Nope. I would say, as a DM, if you're going to say this is going to be a potential mental um, attack on your character, then go for either intelligence or wisdom. Uh, you can probably make a stronger case in wisdom, but personally, I would use intelligence because I want to see more intelligence saving throws. Just me. Um, if it's physical, then the obvious thing would be Constitution. So I don't agree with using charisma, but you know, however y'all want to do it. It talks here about how you cure these taint effects and greater restoration spell. Just being out of the void can help, and you'll eventually get there. So if it's a flesh warp, at least for the mental ones, but it says here if it's a flesh warp, then it can only be removed by regenerate ritual spell. Um, that's pretty high, right? But you as a DM could always figure out, I don't know, some magical berry from the world tree. Think of something, right? If you really want them to remove it, then you can figure out some way that, make them go on a quest for it. Just kind of going through a few other things here. This is the flesh warp examples, and this is what I was saying earlier about, if you're going to use horror in your campaign, be careful. And this is where it gets interesting, right? Where you're getting into void exposure. So these are the things that can basically um, the ways that you can get void taint. So yeah, so just having a short or long rest on a dead world uh, area within the near void regions of the void plane. So, oh yeah. So if you're somewhere in the void, it can be the near void or the deep void. Deep void? Oh no, just the near void. Just the near void is a save DC 10. Again, charisma. Don't like that. But whatever you decide to use, right? Um, and let me go back for a second. So, I still don't like it. Sorry, I was trying to see if there's some other saving throws with some of the effects, but I don't like the charisma. That makes little sense to me. Sorry, I don't care if weird spells come from the void. Charisma doesn't make sense as a save DC. Um, okay, so just continue going through. This resting on one of these planes can give you a DC 10, which yeah, you should generally make, right? But there's a chance that you won't. Um, it says without magical protection. So if I put up like a tiny hut, that could be good enough, right? Or something similar. where you're on some sort of protected uh, plane or pocket dimension or what have you. Just seeing a cult ritual or listening to void tainted lore can be a DC 12. Okay. Attuning to a void magic item, casting a void magic spell via scroll, not via spell casting, which makes sense if you're going to be, if you're going to be a warlock or a void wizard or whatever, you don't want to be doing saving throws every time you cast a spell. But if you're using a spell scroll, you could. Doesn't say that if you're a wizard and or a warlock and use a spell scroll that you're immune to it. Maybe it does in the character section, but something to keep in mind. This kind of popped into my head. Targeted by a six circle or higher void magic spell. Something to keep in mind if you got someone who's casting void magic spells and they're higher level. Yeah, that could definitely mess with your mind. Boop-a-doop-a-doop-a-doo. Encountering a creature in the void or a void dweller, or a creature with the void dweller trait, blah, for the first time. Okay, so if you find some weird creature from the void, you might get scared. Like, feels very Cthulhu. Spending 1 hour in the deep void, basically unprotected, 20 DC, and finishing a long rest in the deep void without protection, a 25 DC. And then they gets into void hazards. There are some ideas here on some really nasty stuff that you might find in the void. So it talks about, these creepers and gravity wells and all kinds of stuff and what effects it has. So all kinds of just ugly stuff, which besides affecting you in other ways, may also make you go void. I don't know, but be affected by the void. So yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff in here about travel and the labyrinth and the void that you could really play with, right? Um, I, if I had to put something on my wish list, just as kind of some final thoughts here, um, I would love to see something similar. Like I know they're trying to make the void, I want to say like the big bad of the labyrinth. But darn it, I would like to see them get into some of these other spots, right? Whether you're talking about, um, you know, the hells, right? Like, give me like, trust me, it's not that Watsy hasn't written about uh, their nine hells in one shape or another, but I would love to see a Cobalt Press twist on how the hells work for them, right? Same with the Astral Sea, the Ethereal. Yeah, I'm probably not going to get those. Astral, they seem to dive into more than ethereal, so I wouldn't mind seeing their take on the astral. But I would like to see like even some of these other worlds, right? That they've briefly outlined in the labyrinth, right? Um, I still have to read all those worlds, but I'd like to see some, if there's some way to get some additional hazards in some of them, might not be a bad thing. Definitely the hells are an obvious one. Um, Maybe even the elemental planes. I don't know, but I would like to see them explore this in a way. In more depth. And maybe that will be some future books or adventures that get written by Cobalt Press. I'd almost bet on it, right? If this is going to be one of their keystones, then it only makes sense to continue to, if not expand on the labyrinth self, then expand on some of these worlds that are in the labyrinth. Continue to increase your lore. I don't need um another Midgard world book, right? I mean, I've got it down there. I got it years after it was published, right? Um, Republishing that world book and just tweaking a few things, I guess you can, but I, you know, that wouldn't be as valuable to me than say writing some sort of adventure or a more detailed book around say Dreamer's Islands or the Shadow Realm or Cold Forge, right? That would be a more original new idea than just revisiting um, the old book. Just my 2 cents. So with that, that's about it. So I hope you enjoyed this little summary of Void Travel. And again, to the fathers out there, happy Father's Day. And I'll talk to y'all soon. Bye.